Hello YouTube, welcome. This is Flights in Asia and back with another video related to aviation and travel, and this time I am going to be covering an area that normally doesn't get covered in the scene of trans-Pacific travel, which is the islands in the Western Pacific in between the Philippines, Hawaii, and just south of Japan, this area known as the Micronesian Islands. Now, you may be asking why am I doing this, and I believe this area normally doesn't get covered in the news, and also the ongoing coronavirus outbreak has affected air travel in this area, in some cases affecting and actually because this area really needs air travel for not just tourism industry but also to get around. It's often the only way to get around to these islands, and with amount of frequency and comfort, as well as transporting essential cargo and in some cases those who require urgent medical care that are not always available on the islands. And the main hub of this is the island of Guam in the Western Pacific. This island is actually, I've covered the impact of United Airlines, which happens to have one of its hubs on the island. This US territory happens to be a main hub for transit and travel in these islands. And right now, the situation has seen airlines impacting United and other airlines serving the tourism industry there. And Guam's airport has, and this is an article from the Guam Daily Post, we're now an island that normally sees around 40 arrivals and departures to just 2 flights per day. And in this article, this is dated March 24, so this is a little bit dated now, and I believe Guam will be suspending more flights gradually. Now, prior to the eventual closure, and we're going to get to this, United cancels flights. So one of the routes that have been operating recently has been the Saipan flights, the Honolulu flights, the nonstop Guam Honolulu flights, and flights to Tokyo Narita Airport. Along with there's actually been a Philippine airline flight, but now that the Philippine government has ordered airlines to shut down, so now those flights are not operating. And this has severely affected the tourism industry on Guam, which primarily bases its tourism industry mostly on Japanese and South Korean tourists. Now, another thing too is the island of Guam gets a lot of the Korean carriers, the Korean airlines, along with the low-cost airlines like Jeju Air and Korean Air's Jin Air subsidiary. So this is going to be very big for the island. This is a huge deal for the island, and also getting around now. And with United does maintain a flight attendant and pilot base there too, with the 737s, along with a maintenance facility. And this is the very and they do operate other flights in this area. And the other destination that I'm going to bring up is the flights to Saipan. This is going to be one of those flights that will be suspended for the month of April. Now, Guam is a U.S. territory, and to the north is the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, which is also part of the U.S. too. So both of these islands, and actually the Northern Marianas, is under U.S. jurisdiction and have been abiding through the what the mandates of the U.S. government has been in terms of the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic response. And with the growing cases now, that we'll see the flight cancellations between April 6 to April 30. Now, Saipan is a interesting case given that there isn't that many flights, though the tourism industry, now it's not as big as Guam, but they do get a lot of flights to South Korea, China, and they have actually the Chinese carriers, which have since suspended flights to Saipan, especially during the early onset of the outbreak in China. And the South Korean carriers as well have suspended. And there's also the flights from Japan with Skymark, and those flights have since been suspended. Along with Guam, Saipan will not be getting international flights starting around this month. So, and Skymark, here we go. Skymark Inc.'s last flight between Saipan and Japan were yesterday. Once the outbound flights flew out, it's temporarily closed the Cnmi's door to international flights. So that was the last international flight. Um, Apparently, in this article, Skymark will be resuming the Saipan to Tokyo Narita flights on May 10. And for the time being, we have the few days left for the Guam Saipan flights will be operating until they suspend them. Now there's a little small inner island carrier, Star Marianas. This is not as big as United and their 737 services. So this will likely be the only airlink that they're gonna get to the islands for the time being. And likely those will be suspended too. Another island that's also being affected is the island of Palau, which actually does have flights to Taiwan and South Korea. It's located, and if you're not familiar with the island of Palau, it's located west of the Philippines, from the island of Mindanao. It's actually, no, I'm sorry, east of the island of Mindanao. It's around and southwest of Guam. And this island, you'd be surprised, and United was at one point the primary airline, and United does operate on regular times the Guam. In addition to the daily Guam Manila flights, there's also a Guam Palau to Manila twice a week, and those flights are now not operating, and this is leaving the island of Palau without a very important airlink, and along with the other flights that have now been suspended. And Palau is known for world-class diving, and this is a huge blow again for these islands. It's a huge blow for the tourism industries. And these, in some cases, like Palau is one of those islands that, if United shuts down, there isn't that many air services, and and United also plays a big role, as we know, and I've mentioned it. And if you aren't familiar, one of the flights that has been severely affected is a very well known, if you're an aviation geek, the island hopper route between Guam and Honolulu, with the 5 stops in the FSM, the Chuuk, Ponape, Kosarai, along with the Marshall Islands, Majuro, and Kwajalein, which happens to be a U.S. base. These flights have been suspended, and actually, and they have implemented the WHO guidelines for the 14-day quarantines, along with banning foreign arrivals. So, like many countries, and this created a situation with a recent flight, I think about 2 weeks ago. This is March 19, where a United 737, on its way to Honolulu from Guam, had to have a stop in Majuro because of mechanical problems, and they've been there for, I believe, a night. And the Marshall Islands could not accommodate the travelers due to concerns of the pandemic. So and this is the problem with these islands. Another thing, when you're served, and United actually probably knows this a lot more, because they have the maintenance facility on Guam, and the next available facility for those flights is Honolulu. If something happens, normally that these flights will have to, these travelers will be stranded, and this is just the case that happens here. Now this important lifeline flight. If you aren't familiar, this is a very crucial lifeline for travel and medical trips to other, like Guam or Hawaii. You need to transit someone, and according to this report, by the way, I need to cite it. It's from RNZ Radio New Zealand. This is a quote of Dan Weiss, the managing director of United's Global Government and Regulatory Affairs, in an email sent to the Marshall Islands government that make up flights. Okay, so that's addressing the flight that got stranded. Now, the last scheduled air services now they suspended it around, I believe, March 24, so they haven't been operating it, and these flights will resume April 13th to 14th. And in this case, now Palau and Guam and Saipan do have regular air services beyond United, but for these, like the Marshall Islands, this is the only air link international airlink to the outside world very much. So this is a very big deal. So aside from the Micronesian islands, we are now going to go to the island of Papua New Guinea, east of Indonesia and north of Australia, and they are going to be operating a limited schedule. So they have suspended domestic flights and they are operating limited international services to Brisbane, Cairns, and Singapore. And this was effective last week. So for a week they've been doing a reduced schedule like many of the airlines around the world, and I believe these are the very crucial flights for their system. Now, as for the tourism industries for these destinations, it's gonna be there's no question. It's gonna be very impacted heavily, and I do in terms of the recovery. We are gonna be now. Now, here's the thing, though. An interesting thing. Probably a few more months, maybe to a year, that the travel industry around the world will get back to normal. Um, Now, this is probably the biggest crisis for anybody, and who could have expected this? And now we're seeing, and this is gonna be like a really big, and in the case for these islands now, that they are losing very important air links of travel. In some cases, it's a necessity, especially that food can sometimes be transported on these flights, and it's a big deal for United and their services in the Pacific. Now, I do believe United, they still have and when the recovery period, they will have the nonstop flights between Guam and Honolulu, which travelers do connect from places like Manila to the mainland. And there's also the flights from Guam to Japan. But I do believe when the time comes, they will be operating reduced flights to like the cities that they normally operate, like the Tokyo, Narita, the Osaka, Nagoya, and Fukuoka routes from Guam. Not many people know that United has, in terms of flights to and from Japan, the most flights from any U.S. destination by United to the Japan is actually from Guam to those cities. And at some point, they had all these flights to different cities in Japan, which now has shrunk because lower demand compared to years past. Now, South Korea travelers in the past, again, there have been reports that travelers in the past have utilized the flights, um, the low cost airlines, and Korean Air. And I do believe Asiana serves Saipan, and I think also Korean Air has flights to Palau, and those flights have been suspended. I don't think these flights will be, and these are leisure destinations. These are not business destinations. So the flight resumptions will have to be gradual, maybe a year or two, at the time of recovery. In terms of and also there's flights from Taiwan, I believe. Likely again, tourist destination. Probably not a priority for the likes of those airlines coming back anytime soon. But eventually they will, but this is gonna take a lot of time. But United will be like the first airline to come back because, again, important lifeline and a major player. They have the resources to implement flights left and right. I mean, not left and right, but to implement the flights that are needed from the network to and from Guam. So I do believe the flights that we'll see to a sense of normalcy will be to Tokyo. Um, they do have offer connecting services, I believe, from Guam, Tokyo, and to the mainland too. So along with the Guam to Honolulu nonstop flights, and another destination I do believe they will recover is to the to Manila as well. Um, Manila is they do connecting services from Honolulu and the mainland to Manila via Guam. So that's likely gonna be a flight that will come back. That's very much it. I want to say, I think that's off of my head right now, and this is not an easy situation for everybody. And these islands are right now. And normally, when you talk about trans-Pacific travel, we do hear a lot about in the headlines the joint ventures in South Korea, Japan, and also like the flights to non-stop flights now to China. But we don't normally hear about what's going on in these islands in the Pacific, where air travel is a very, I mean, this is a very important air link, in some cases the only way to get to these islands. So it's very interesting to see how the aviation downturn and the reduction of flights and the travel bans are impacting these islands, and not just getting around, but their tourism industries are taking a hard hit right now. That's about it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And also let me know what your thoughts on this situation for these islands. Once again, please stay safe and have a great day.